Are you up for a DAC shootout? I haven't done one of these for a while and I thought this one would be interesting. Auburn Distribution, that are responsible for Hagel and Amphion in the UK, also distribute the Merason brand. And they reached out a little while ago and said, do you fancy trying out one of their DACs? And I thought, oh yeah. And the reason is that buying habits have changed quite a bit in the last decade. Maybe not so much with speakers and amplifiers, but certainly with DACs. A lot of people seem very comfortable buying direct without auditioning first. Chinese companies seem to be everywhere when it comes to the DAC market, not just the sub £1,000 sector where the likes of SMSL, Topping and Gustard seem to have a stranglehold on the market. But if you're looking for a DAC below £5,000, the chances are that a Chinese sell direct to consumer DAC will be on your shortlist, whether it be Denafrips, Hollow Audio, or one of the new brands that seems to be entering the marketplace every other month. Merason is made in Switzerland. Have you been to Switzerland and tried to buy a beer or try to buy anything in Switzerland for that matter? It's one of the most expensive places to live in the world. Surely a Swiss-made DAC for circa £1,500 isn't going to be able to compete with the latest offerings from China. Oh really? Straight out of the box, and there's an obvious difference. The Merason Frerot DAC weighs just under 1 kilogram, 2.2 pounds. No billet aluminium like you're going to get on the Denafrips here, but the casework is all metal and nicely finished for a DAC that retails for £1,500 here in the UK. The unit measures 225 by 50 by 180 millimeters. That's 8.9 by 2.0 by 7.1 inches. There's not much to fiddle with. An LED to indicate when the Frerot is powered up, and another one that lights up when it locks onto an input, of which there are 5 accessed through a rotary dial. No remote, no volume adjustment. This is purely a DAC. The rear has analog outputs for balanced XLR and single-ended RCA connections. There are 2 digital coaxial inputs, 2 optical Toslink and 1 USB. Below the switch is the connection for the supplied 9V 4A switch mode power supply. However, adjacent is the 5-pin DIN connector for the optional Merason Pow1 linear power supply, which I'll come to next. The Pow1 comes in an identical size chassis to the Frerot. It retails for £850, but you can knock off £150 if you buy the pair together for £2,200. Nothing to see on the front other than a nice clean aesthetic, so let's switch to the back. The Pow1 connects to the Frerot via a DIN cable you get in the box. Not only is it a more secure connection than what you typically get with off-board power supplies, it also suggests that there's more than meets the eye going on with the Pow1. This is the internals of the Merason Frerot DAC. Now the power supply is external, but there is some management of power that happens internally, and that happens over here. You see the 2 power relays. The rest is filtering, perhaps a little bit of regulation. The middle section, that is the digital section. You see the USB input. And this subsection is the USB interface. Merason used the Anamero scheme. So Anamero Technologies is a separate company. They design the USB interface and then it's incorporated into this board. And it's known to produce a low jitter output, which keeps digital noise to a minimum. But the USB input is also galvanically isolated, as are the Toslink and coaxial digital inputs, and that keeps external noise to a minimum as well. And those are the 2 crystal oscillators. They're part of the clock. The femto crystal oscillators, one for 44.1, the other for 48 kilohertz, and they're multiples. The rest of the ICs here, they're for system logic, input switching, etc. This one is the Burr Brown DAC. That's the PCM 1794A. Now it's an interesting DAC this because it's a hybrid DAC chip. It's not pure Delta Sigma. The lower 18 bits are Delta Sigma and the top 6 bits in this 24-bit DAC are a multi-bit. And there are pluses and minuses to Delta Sigma DACs versus multi-bit DACs. The benefit of Delta Sigma is that they have better measured performance. And that's mainly because of oversampling and noise shaping. That helps to improve the signal to noise ratio. But because of that extra processing, some people believe that they don't sound as natural. They certainly manipulate the PCM signal a lot more than multi-bits. And So this DAC chip is doing a little bit of both, a bit like your audio DACs. And over on this side we have the analog output stage, and it's fully discrete class A. And there are 4 channels, 1, 2, 3 and 4, because this is a fully balanced DAC. So if you're using the XLR outputs, which are here, you can take advantage of a slightly lower noise floor. There's nothing particularly fancy or elaborate about anything here, but it's well thought out and well designed, and what you'd expect to see on a good quality product. Over to the Pow1 linear power supply, and here in the corner we have an AC inlet filter that's fully encased, toroidal transformer. Now check the specs, there's actually 3 windings coming off the secondary of this transformer, 15 VA, 15 VA and 10 VA, which means that you've got 3 independent supplies. The 2 15 VAs are for the analog sections, left and right, and the 10 VA is for the digital section. And then the rectification happens here, those banker diodes. Those are for the 2 analog sections, the 2 15 VAs. They convert the AC into DC, and the rectification for the digital section happens here. The rectifier is in the middle of those 2 capacitors. And then you've got 3 capacitors for the 3 supplies. They're actually Japanese Nishikon capacitors, top quality parts, each rated at 5,600 microfarads, which is more than sufficient for the amount of power that you have going into this DAC. And they smooth out any ripples on the voltage, provide a bit of a current buffer. The regulation of the supply happens here. There's going to be 3 regulators here as well, because you've got 3 supplies. And what that does is it basically stabilizes the voltage and to some extent the current as well. And that's why you need these extra connectors on this output 5-pin DIN, because you've got 3 voltages that are being fed off this power supply into the DAC. For comparison purposes, I use my Denafrips Aries 12.1. I told Alvin at Vinshine Audio, who runs the global distribution for Denafrips, that I'm not going to formally review this DAC, and the reason is that it's essentially the same model as the 12th anniversary that I reviewed 6 months ago, just in a fancier case. But I've acquired the Aries 12.1 as I wanted to keep a reference DAC for circa £1,000, and the baby Denafrips is currently my favourite. I have to say, it's much more substantial and striking in its new billet aluminium natural finish clothing. So how does the Merason Frerot compare with the standard power supply? Actually very well. The 2 DACs have a lot more that's similar than different. Both have a warm tone, although the Denafrips is a shade warmer whilst the Merason is heading more towards neutral. Both DACs have very good soundstage depth given the price, but the Denafrips does extend sound a little bit wider. It also has a meatier presentation thanks to a little bit of extra bass weight and a touch more openness on top, but by no means is it all one-way traffic. The Frerot has the more agile bass, still with plenty of authority, and because of that there's less bleed through to the mid-range, meaning that it's the Swiss DAC that makes it easier to follow performers in the mix. I should stress that these are subtle differences that become apparent over extended AB listening sessions. Both are excellent sounding DACs that perform at a similar level, and I wouldn't claim any outright winner here. So what about adding the Pow1 linear power supply? At the end of the day, £850 is over half the price of the standalone DAC. Surely it can't make that much of a difference. Oh yes it does, as long as your system is revealing enough to show the differences. There's a whole jump up in the level of clarity and focus. It shifts the Frerot from sounding slightly smaller than the Denafrips to noticeably bigger. I'm talking about soundstage width. There wasn't any discernible improvement in soundstage depth as far as I could detect. It also cleans up the bass and the mid-range, and that improvement in timing gives much more tangibility to the locations of performers in the mix. But perhaps the most obvious improvement is in the high frequencies, where instead of lagging behind the Denafrips Aries 12.1, it now surpasses it. It's very audible with things like cymbal hits. Time to up the ante. The Gustard R26 is another Chinese DAC, built like it's been specified for military use. It'll set you back circa £1,600 if purchased direct from retailers based in China, like Shenzhen Audio. The Gustard R26 isn't quite the giant killer that some people rave about, but it's still comfortably the best sounding DAC that I've heard, sub £2,000, and it remains the more resolving DAC here. The background is a little bit quieter, allowing a few more micro details to emerge, and it also has greater soundstage depth, if not quite the soundstage width of the Frerot and Pow1 combination. Now, the sound of the Gustard R26 has changed a little bit since I reviewed it several months ago. It's ridiculous how long some of these R2R ladder DACs from China take to burn in. But even though it sounds fuller and less analytical, there's still a touch of dryness to the presentation, which you don't get a hint of with the Merason combo. So yet again, we have two DACs here that perform at a similar level with relative strengths and weaknesses. The lack of features on the Frerot may be an issue for some people, and that's because this is purely a DAC. You can't use it as a preamp in a digital only system. There's no volume control, no remote control, and there's no support for MQA. None of these are a problem for me, but they may be a problem for you. Anyway, as far as I can tell, MQA is there to solve a problem that doesn't exist. Oh dear, did I say that out loud? What is a slight issue is that it's PCM only. I do have a handful of DSD files that I would like my DAC to play, but I fall probably into the minority there. Most people can be reassured that it will play PCM files up to 192 24-bit resolution. The standard Frerot with its wall wart power supply is an ideal partner for my favourite sub £2,000 amplifiers, the Exposure 2510 and Wilsonton R8 with PS Vane tubes. Please take a bow. Right up there with them is the 2023 version of the classic musical Fidelity A1 that I just finished reviewing. The Frerot sounded great with this Class A amplifier fed with Amphion Argon 1 speakers. It's an upgrade to the internal DAC in the Hagel H190. Although there's nothing wrong with the internal DAC, it doesn't have the natural tone and soundstage depth that the entry Merason contributes. When you step into something like my Product Response 1 SEs and Exposure 21 Pre and 18 Super monoblocks, adding the Pow1 linear power supply to the Frerot really pays dividends. The modern equivalent of those amplifiers and speakers retail for not much south of £8,000, but it's not about the price. You need a system that's capable of the timing and creating the space of that system. For that, you don't have to spend £8,000, but there's plenty of systems at £8,000 and above that simply don't achieve that. And it's when you have the rest of the system that can create that three-dimensionality that adding the Pow1 to the Frerot makes a lot of sense. Merason is a small Swiss company that only produces two products, excluding the power supply. The Frerot, as the name suggests, is a little brother to their £7,000 DAC1. You're not going to be blown away by how substantial the device is, even though it's well constructed, or its feature set, but they're the only trade-offs against the very best Chinese competitors. The key to great sound always comes down to design and what is inside. Sure, it's incredibly hard for European manufacturers to compete with lower production costs overseas, but it's not impossible. That's exactly what the Frerot delivers. It's a natural, detail-sounding DAC without any obvious sonic shortcomings. As your system grows and improves, so can it with the addition of the Pow1 linear power supply. Yeah, you're paying a bit of a premium for the fact that it's built in Switzerland, and that has to be reflected in my final judgment here. But you should also ask yourself, if you're buying a DAC from one of those overseas websites, what level of support do you have if something goes wrong? This is sold through the traditional dealer network route, and that normally gives you a little bit of wiggle room to negotiate on price, which can change the value proposition altogether. But regardless, I'm very impressed with what's on offer here. The Merason Frerot, with or without the Pow1 linear power supply, gets a very highly recommended from this channel. My question for today is, what is your experience of buying direct? Please share that in the comment section, the good and the bad. I think it'd be useful to know what companies are doing a really good job and those that have room for improvement. And I'd ask people not to make generalized political statements bashing nations. I just don't want that kind of vibe on this channel. All that remains for me to say is, if you like what I'm doing with this channel, you want to see it grow and you haven't done so already, please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification. You might want to check me out on Patreon. There's a couple of consultancy services you can access there if you think I can help you on your audiophile journey. Also, check out the ABA Club on Patreon. There's some great and fun ways to interact with me and other Patreons. But for today, for now, a British audiophile signing off.